By now, we all know that a man is more sensitive than a woman, and he's vulnerable to different things than she is. So, most of the time, a woman has absolutely no clue that she might be saying or doing anything that could even be remotely related to attack, blame, or criticism. This is where we need to understand the power of our language, and that words often hold very different meanings for a man than they do for a woman. Hello, I'm Dr. Debi, and I've been helping men, women, and couples grow together for more than 25 years. Now it's your turn to learn what I learned and taught as a couples counselor and university professor. You are the wise woman, and this is your personal development podcast packed with instant encouragement and practical tips. And men can learn about women too, because this is a safe place where women are valued and men are respected. We talk about biology, socialization, behavior, emotions, communication, and connection, because men and women are different. Always have been, always will be, and that's a very good thing. This is where we need to understand the power of our language, and that words often hold very different meanings for a man than they do for a woman. For example, I was counseling an engaged couple who'd hit a roadblock on their way to the altar, metaphorically, not literally, of course. As they struggled to understand one another, the woman looked at her fiancé and said, "I hate that I'm causing you so many problems. Maybe you'd be better off without me. Maybe it'd be better if I just walked away." Now, you can understand that statement, right? She sounds like she's willing to sacrifice her happiness for his. But that's not what he heard at all. What he actually heard was, "You better get your act together, bud, or I'm out of here." He was deeply wounded by her statement and didn't want it to show, so he stiffened his upper lip and shut her out to protect himself. When I told her how he heard her statement, she looked at us both in disbelief. Then he confirmed my translation from female expressive language into male receptive language. What she'd said was not what he had heard. His sensitivity to rejection, to not being good enough, to his failure to please her, had colored the meaning of her words. He was listening through the filter of his emotions, through his vulnerability and intense fear of being found inadequate. So, I've learned to speak two languages. As a woman, I get where gals are coming from. Sometimes we can be amazingly direct in asking for what we want. At other times, we're not sure what we want, so we can also be pretty vague. Most of us have a hard time getting the men we love to understand us. It often feels like they're just trying to fix us, so naturally, I speak female. As the mother of 3 sons, I've spent a lot of time studying the male experience too. It's been a joy to watch my boys grow into men, marry, and become parents themselves. They've taught me a lot, and I'm still learning from them. I've also studied the psychology of men and traditional masculinity at the graduate and the postdoctoral levels, and I've even taught a university class on this very popular subject. What I've learned? Most women don't have a clue about men's experience, and that most men don't know how to explain it. So I've also learned to speak male. Differences in body language. Dr. Deborah Tannen is an expert in the field of interpersonal communication. She conducted a study of same-sex pairs of children, elementary school through high school, who were asked to take 2 chairs into a room and wait there for the researcher. I used to show video clips of this study in my class at Azusa Pacific University. It was amazing to watch. The female pairs were consistently engaged in face-to-face conversation while they were waiting for the experimenter. Conversely, the boys placed their chairs in a side-by-side configuration. They rarely said more than a few words to one another and avoided eye contact. So, just how do you think this tendency might play out in conversations between men and women? Well, for a man, the face-to-face approach may make him feel like he's being challenged, especially if his woman is upset. Instinctively, he prepares to defend himself. And as every football fan knows, the best defense is a good offense, which tends to be not so good for her. Here's a tip for you. One of the best ways to get a man of any age to talk to you is simply to engage in a joint activity that puts you side by side. Then let your conversation flow naturally, and before you know it, he'll be talking about more serious stuff. Find an enjoyable activity, or semi enjoyable activity like washing dishes, that he would like to do together that puts you side by side. Don't pressure him to start talking, just listen and see what happens. For women, the side by side approach may feel like her man isn't that interested in her, or that he simply doesn't give a rip about what she's saying. If she feels like she's being ignored, she'll hit harder with her words, trying to get him to respond to her. Here's another tip. If she appears to be upset about something, look into her eyes with compassion. This isn't a stare down, okay? Let her know you really want to understand her. Then give her a chance to speak and listen carefully. After a few moments, say, "Let me see if I've got this right. You're telling me that blank. Did I get it right?" Then you want to pause for her answer. And then say, "Did I miss anything?" Again, pause for her answer. Then, "How can I help?" Pause for her answer. Now, if you get lost in what she said, just tell her you got lost and ask her to try one more time. It's okay to tell her that you need her to give it to you bit by bit. She's been following me too, right? And if you don't know what to say, simply tell her, "I don't know what to say. I wish I did. I really wish I did." And if it's appropriate, make physical contact with her while you're talking. Differences in quantity. As previously noted, men tend to listen in sentences. They're looking for a problem to solve or a purpose for relating the information. However, women tend to talk in paragraphs, sometimes volumes. Of course, sometimes a man talks more than his woman does, and sometimes a man is more anxious than his woman is. Yes, like anything else in life, there will always be individual differences. So keep that in mind, just in case you weren't already making allowances for your mate's uniqueness. Differences in word choice. Here's another potential gender differences. Men tend to be more literal in their word choice, whereas women tend to use general, more inclusive statements. It's how we were taught to be considerate and relational in our conversations. Remember Sean and Nicole? She wanted to stop and get something to eat, and Sean thought she was asking if he wanted to get something to eat. He took her question literally and said no. Her feelings were hurt. Jim and Lisa had a similar misunderstanding. They'd made plans for a get together at another couple's condo for a good home cooked meal. At the last minute, her friend's husband contacted Jim to let them know they'd invited several others to join them for the evening. As he shared the update with Lisa, she felt overwhelmed. She explained that she'd had a headache most of the day and was worried that she might be coming down with a bug, but she hadn't wanted to back out on their plans because she knew the other wife would be going to a lot of trouble to fix a great meal for them. However, now that it had become a group event, Lisa really wanted to stay home and rest. "I just don't feel like being around a whole bunch of people tonight," she explained. "How do you feel about rescheduling for another time?" Jim's response was that he didn't want to cancel. Lisa was hurt and angry, and Jim couldn't figure out why. "Can you?" He answered the question she asked. He didn't want to reschedule. She asked how he felt about rescheduling, and he told her. But that wasn't her question. She was politely asking him if he would tell them she didn't feel well, so they would need to reschedule. But that wasn't what she said, or what he heard. The long and short of it all, I fully realize I've only revealed a very small portion of the miscommunication iceberg here. Perhaps I'll need to write a whole nother book, or another course, or maybe create a smartphone app that can translate female into male, and vice versa. or that gives you the perfect response to anything the opposite sex says. That'd be cool, eh? Our emotions ebb and flow, especially when we're under stress. At one time or another in the counseling process, one or both partners will tell me they're giving up on their relationship. And I always say I'll hang in there with them even when they don't feel like going on. They usually keep going on because they love one another. And the more they trust in the Lord, the better things become for them both. Go figure. Being created in the image of God, we experience a full range of emotions. Joy, anger, sadness, hurt, and fear are the basic ones, with lots of variations. Unfortunately, due to the consequences of the fall, guilt and shame are also very common in our human experience. And God designed us in such a way that our emotions are primary. That is, feelings come first. He did it that way for some very good reasons. Mostly, he did it so we could experience joy in him and in one another. So much for that lie about God not caring about our happiness, eh? Our emotions are like a barometer, designed to tell us that something's going on inside of us or in the space around us. So it's our job to figure out what our feelings are telling us about what's happening and what we can do in response. No matter what anyone tries to tell you, your first response to any situation is emotional. You're created that way. Information gets into your brain via two pathways. The emotional pathway is faster, reason is the slower pathway. Emotions tell you action is needed now. If you've ever seen a child run into the street in front of your car, you know what I mean. You slam on the brakes as soon as you see him. A few seconds later, your brain kicks in and tells you what happened. If you'd had to reason your way through the situation, your response would have been too late. We know that emotion varies with gender, but how? Because women are emotionally sensitive and often express their feelings verbally and openly, many have assumed that women are more sensitive than men. Feelings are primary for a woman. However, they're also primary for a man. It's just our expression of them that differs. Volumes could be and have been written about the role of emotions, as well as gender differences in emotional experience and expression. It's a fascinating subject, but I want to give you some practical information, so I'll stick to a brief, mostly user friendly example of how men and women use emotional information differently. Consider analysis versus action. Stefania is watching TV and she gets hungry. She begins to think about her recent food intake. She's torn between wanting the chocolate cake that's left over from Sunday's birthday party and realizing she probably already overshot her calorie, fat, carb content for today with the extravagant lunch she had at Olive Garden with her best friend. She also calculates how much exercise she's had and how much exercise she could commit to over the next 24 to 48 hours. Her deliberation goes on for more than 30 minutes before she makes up her mind. Eduardo is sitting beside her. He feels a slight hunger pang, gets up, goes to the fridge, and devours the chocolate cake. Stefania didn't stand a chance. Generally speaking, emotions mean different things to men than they do to women. For men, emotions signal a need to take action. In short, fix the problem or get away from it. And if it's painful, don't go there, dummy. For a woman, however, feelings are there to increase your understanding, especially in the context of relationship. A, what does this mean? And B, what should I do? So much for men thinking they're the logical ones, eh? Actually, men who tend to use a logical approach are also operating on the feelings first basis. Because men are so sensitive to others, they may have a difficult time sitting with unresolved emotions, whether those feelings are theirs or their mates. Thus, let's get this problem solved. As previously stated, many women deal with anxiety and worry about almost everything, most especially about their relationship. It's a driving force in their need to talk. Most women, not all of course, have difficulty letting things go. And so, many men struggle with an enduring belief about their own inadequacy. Many a man carries an internal critic, like an irritated coach who's taken up permanent residence inside his head, one who's never satisfied with his performance and continually shouts out to him the play by play of what a failure he is. So, whenever he hears his mate's anxiety, which usually sounds a lot like anger, he adds the data to his backlog of failures. And to protect himself, he builds a wall. Fear is a primary emotion. It's meant to move us to action quickly because it protects us from harm. In our culture, we're mostly afraid of being vulnerable, of being kicked while we're down. And our first reaction to fear is to hide. But fear isn't the real problem. The problem is the hiding. We even hide from God, which assures we won't receive His help, which we so desperately need, and we hide from one another. That means we put up a wall to protect ourselves. Walls keep bad things out, but walls also keep good things out. Plus, our wall always hurts our partner. What style wall do you build? Some prefer the walls of avoidance and withdrawal. Others build walls of criticism, attacking, or blaming to keep the focus off themselves. Both approaches are hurtful. As a couples therapist, I've had a lot of opportunity to observe how hard women work at their relationships. When something's wrong, it's often the woman who notices. She wants to talk about it, to figure out what's wrong and fix the problem. Here's an example of a frequent complaint from our relationship survey. We have problems agreeing on the way in which we will deal with problems. I want to deal with them when they come up, and he wants to think about it on his own for a long time and hope the problem goes away before we talk about it. Chances are, this woman won't be able to wait for him to bring up the problem again. She'll be miserable waiting on him to say something. At best, she'll feel like it's just not that important to him. At worst, she'll feel like she's just not that important to him. And as the hours and days tick by, she'll start to feel more and more anxious about their relationship. So, what exactly is stonewalling? Stonewalling is withdrawing or refusing to respond to your partner. For a man, it may be a response to his own confusion or due to his feeling overwhelmed. Remember that in early life, a man learns that he has to come up with the answers to problems on his own. So, this behavior makes sense. However, the stone wall is a defensive move, which is different than the man cave we discussed in another lesson. For women, being stonewalled by her mate creates excessive anxiety and anger. Yes, women stonewall too. Now, for the surprising side of stonewalling, it's actually much more damaging to the relationship if the woman is the stonewaller. So, do you shut him out when he hurts your feelings or does something you don't approve of? The female version of stonewalling can be subtle, refusing to talk to him for a few minutes, or dramatic, pouting and stomping out of the room, slamming the doors, not speaking for days. Ladies, observe your own behavior. Notice how often you stonewall in response to something he says or does. Remember, your stonewalling can be more subtle, so you'll have to be a diligent detective. I received this comment from a visitor to our Understanding Men website. Notice how this man signed his comment. It reveals a ton about what he's experiencing. He said, "Yours is the very first place I visited that acknowledges the excessive damage caused by a female stonewaller. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm aware of my male ego. I can intellectualize this issue until I'm aware of my male ego. I can intellectualize this issue I'm faced with. I spend an inordinate amount of time qualifying the whys, the hows, and all the possible misinterpretations before saying one word about how I'm feeling. But it doesn't matter. At some point, At some point, she will disengage. Here are her most popular ways. I can't take this anymore. Can we talk about this later? Shouldn't you be working instead of dealing with this? This one really hurts. Or she'll change the subject and ignore what I'm saying. Or she'll pretend to listen, but meanwhile, she's only in her own world. She'll play the victim. You're always complaining about me. My response is usually, it's not a complaint, it's a concern. And if we manage to complete one of these conversations in a respectful and courteous way, we wouldn't be here again. If I make one mistake, as she sees it, during attempts at communicating, for example, raising my voice slightly, she's done. I eventually end up losing my temper and saying something I feel I should apologize for saying, and always do. She has a difficult time with apologies and acknowledging truth. It's funny, I completely understand what she's doing. I was guilty of this in a previous relationship. However, this does nothing to heal the pain I feel. Here's the kicker. Other than this, she's the sweetest, funniest, nicest person I've ever been with. But my real need for what I term as real intimacy would seem to transcend this. Any thoughts would be deeply appreciated. Signed, Emasculated. My response. Most people stonewall as a defense against overwhelming anxiety. Think of it as her best attempt to calm everything and everyone in the midst of what feels like an impossible situation. Emasculated followed up with another question. P.S. I almost forgot. What's your reasons for saying it's actually more damaging to the relationship if the woman is the stonewaller? Here's my second response. According to research, men are more emotionally and relationally sensitive, and they're less likely to have the skills needed to repair the damage. That is, it can be very, very difficult for a man to express his vulnerability and to elicit the empathy and support he needs from his partner. Dealing with conflict and resolving disagreements. How disagreements are resolved has a significant impact on the level of satisfaction for both partners. For example, the scoring for one particular couple's questionnaire weighs each answer differently in response to the following statement. When disagreements arise, they usually result in A, the husband giving in, B, the wife giving in, or C, agreement by mutual give and take. If you answer A, you get 0 points. If you answer B, you get 2 points. If you answer C, you get 10 points. Perhaps this is where men's greater emotional sensitivity comes into play. Or are we back to the fact that they need us, and they need us a lot? Grantley Morris reported, in a survey, marrieds were asked to name their best friend. Women typically named another woman, whereas most men either named their wives or confessed to there being no one in their entire world they would call their best friend. This highlights how isolated most men are and how dependent they are upon their wives for companionship. There simply seems to be something about being male that causes this aloneness. It's so basic that it's even found in the animal kingdom. In a wide range of animal species, females generally group together with each other and with young, whereas mature males are loners, usually relating to their own species only to fight other males or to mate with females. It might take a husband years to realize just how mistaken was his presumption, and his wife's presumption, that his wife understood him. The typical husband's reliance upon his wife for companionship and emotional support makes it a chilling experience when he finally concedes she seems incapable of understanding him. Can you imagine how devastating it is to feel there's no one on the planet who knows and understands you to the degree that you crave and deserve? If genuine and not a mere pickup line, "My wife doesn't understand me," are among the loneliest words in the English language. Not only that, the inability of most men to get close to each other usually leaves him feeling unable to turn to anyone for solace, unless it be another woman. He is strongly pressured either to try that or try to protect himself from further hurt and disappointment by withdrawing somewhat from his wife and hope he can bury his pain in his job or other activities. When this happens, wives start complaining, never dreaming of the role they played in making their husbands act this way. Clearly, we need to learn how to be better at understanding one another and at recognizing the impact of our words. When a woman attacks, criticizes, blames, or complains, even if she isn't doing it intentionally, her man will feel like a loser, or he'll have to fight to avoid feeling like a loser, or he'll withdraw to avoid feeling like a loser, all of which will leave him feeling like a loser. There's no way he can win at this game, and by the way, she can't win either. The bottom line on emotions: men and women both experience a full range of vulnerable emotions, but they express those emotions differently. Men tend to take action, whereas women tend to want to talk about how they feel. However, both men and women are inclined to build walls of self-protection to keep themselves from being kicked when they're down, and the particular kinds of walls we choose to build are always painful. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Wise Woman's Guide to Men and Marriage. What did you think? Did the information raise more questions? Do you want to learn more? Head over to wisewomansguide.com for show notes and links to the resources mentioned in this episode. And if you're looking for other wise women to bounce around ideas and ask questions, be sure to join my exclusive community for women on Facebook. The link is waiting for you at awisewomansguide.com.